Ladies and gentlemen, there are moments in life when we invest emotionally in someone only to face the sting of rejection. It's a painful experience, one that leaves us questioning ourselves, our worth, and our understanding of the other person. And then, after some time, they come back just when you thought they were gone for good. But why? Why does this happen? What drives a man to return after rejecting you? This isn't merely a matter of chance, but something deeper, more complex, a manifestation of the human experience. Validation is a fundamental human need, deeply embedded in our psychological makeup. It is a need that transcends gender, culture, and age, existing as a universal truth of the human condition. To validate someone is to affirm their worth, to show them that they are seen, heard, and understood. It is a powerful force, one that shapes our behavior, our decisions, and our relationships. But what happens when this need is unmet? What happens when someone walks away from you, rejecting not just your affection, but perhaps your very existence in their eyes? The emptiness that follows can be overwhelming, and the desire for validation, once rejected, becomes even more intense. This is where the real psychological complexity emerges, the pull to return, to seek that validation once more. When a person rejects you, it is not just an external action that you feel, it strikes at your core. Rejection challenges something fundamental within us, our sense of worth. Human beings are social creatures, and much of our identity is shaped by how others perceive us. From the moment we are born, we seek connection, we crave recognition and acknowledgement, because as social beings, we rely on each other to define ourselves. It is through others that we see who we are, and this process of validation begins early in life. In childhood, it comes from parents, teachers, and peers. In adulthood, it comes from friends, partners, and colleagues. When someone validates you, they affirm that you matter, that you are worthy of attention, affection, and care. Rejection, on the other hand, undermines this validation. It creates a void, a gap between your perception of yourself and how you believe others see you. This gap is incredibly painful, and it often leaves us questioning our worth. The question that follows rejection is often not just why did they leave, but what is wrong with me? The feeling of being invalidated can lead to deep self-doubt, insecurity, and sometimes even self-loathing. In the absence of external validation, we are left to confront the more difficult question of whether we are enough on our own. This is an uncomfortable space, one that many try to avoid by seeking out validation from others. It's not just a desire for attention, but a psychological need, one that, if unfulfilled, can create a sense of emptiness that is difficult to ignore. This need for validation becomes a driving force. The person who walks away may feel empowered by their decision at first, but as time passes, they begin to wonder if the choice they made was a reflection of their own worth. Rejection doesn't just affect the one rejected, it impacts the one who rejected as well. There is an internal conflict that arises, a questioning of whether they made the right decision. The person who rejected you may have moved on to new experiences, but somewhere deep down there is the realization that they have potentially lost something valuable, something meaningful. The validation they once received from you, whether it was emotional support, admiration, or affection, is no longer present. And so the void they once created in you now exists within them. They too find themselves questioning their own actions, their own sense of self-worth. This process often leads to a reconsideration of the past. The emotional distance that was created by rejection begins to shrink, and the person who walked away may find themselves drawn back into the relationship, not necessarily because they feel deeply in love, but because they recognize the value in the connection they once had. They return because they are seeking something that will affirm their worth. This is not to say that all returns are motivated solely by selfish desires for validation, but it is a central force that drives many of these actions. The individual seeks reassurance, a form of validation from you that they are, in fact, still worthy of your affection and attention. They want to know that they are still important in your life, that they have not been discarded, and that they can still evoke positive feelings in you. Validation becomes a cycle, one that is not easily broken. The person who returns after rejection may not initially realize that they are seeking validation. They may tell themselves that they miss you, that they regret the decision they made, or that they want another chance. But underneath those reasons lies a deeper truth. They are looking for the reassurance that they are still valuable to you, They want confirmation that they still matter, that their worth has not diminished in your eyes. This need for validation can become so strong that it overrides other considerations. The desire to feel seen, appreciated, and significant can become all-consuming, pushing aside concerns about past mistakes or broken trust. It is, in a sense, a desperate attempt to fill the void left by rejection to restore balance in their own perception of themselves. It is important to recognize that validation is not a superficial need. It is not about receiving compliments or praise for trivial achievements. True validation goes much deeper. It is about being acknowledged for who you truly are, your strengths, your flaws, your vulnerabilities. It is the recognition that you are enough as you are and that your presence matters. For someone who has been rejected, this acknowledgement is crucial. Without it, they may find themselves adrift, uncertain of their value and constantly searching for the external affirmation they crave. The real reason someone comes back after rejecting you is rooted in this deep need for validation. It is a psychological and emotional drive that cannot be easily ignored or dismissed. When they return, it is not just to rekindle a relationship, it is to restore their sense of self-worth, to reconnect with the affirmation that they once found in you. And while this need for validation may seem selfish at times, it is, in truth, an inherent part of the human experience, a reflection of our vulnerability, our desire to be seen and valued by others. Emotions are powerful forces, ones that can't simply be discarded or forgotten with a single action or decision. When someone rejects you, it's easy to think that their departure signifies an end, an emotional severing, the closing of the chapter. But the reality is far more complex. The emotional connections that form between people do not dissolve with a rejection. Rather, they often become entangled in the psyche, lingering in ways that are not immediately visible. This lingering emotional connection is what we refer to as unresolved emotional ties, bonds that, despite physical distance or the act of rejection, remain unbroken, pulling the individuals back together over time. These emotional ties are not just fleeting feelings or momentary attractions. They are deep, ingrained connections that evolve over time, formed through shared experiences, mutual understanding, and vulnerability. When you allow someone into your life, you offer them a piece of your heart, your thoughts, your vulnerabilities. This kind of emotional intimacy creates a bond that is not easily undone. Rejection may remove the person physically, but it cannot erase the emotional imprint that they have left on you. It is as though a part of you becomes intertwined with them, like threads woven into the fabric of your emotional being. These threads don't simply vanish with time, no matter how hard you try to sever them. And often the person who walks away from you may not fully comprehend the emotional impact they've had on you, nor the lasting effect of their absence. Unresolved emotional ties are particularly potent because they are not always recognized consciously. They can remain beneath the surface, influencing thoughts, feelings, and actions in ways that are subtle but profound. Even after a rejection, the emotional bond continues to exert its influence, leaving both parties grappling with the psychological residue. You may find yourself thinking about the person, questioning what went wrong, or revisiting past moments of connection in your mind. These thoughts can consume you, causing you to dwell on the rejection as if trying to make sense of it. The bond continues to exist because the emotional connection was not fully processed or resolved. The person who rejected you may try to move on, convincing themselves that the decision was final, that they are free from the relationship. However, the deeper emotional currents run beneath their surface, unacknowledged but still active. For the person who walked away, the emotional ties can become a source of inner conflict. Initially, rejection might seem like a way to escape, a means of distancing oneself from what might feel like an uncomfortable or unmanageable emotional situation. However, over time, that sense of detachment begins to dissipate, and the unresolved emotions return. They may not realize it immediately, but a growing sense of loss starts to settle in. The emotional absence of the person they rejected creates an internal void. The rejection may have been a protective mechanism, an attempt to guard against vulnerability or fear of intimacy, but once that defense is in place, the emotional impact of walking away starts to weigh on the person who left. They feel the absence more acutely than they anticipated, and this unresolved connection becomes more difficult to ignore. This emotional dissonance can cause the person to question their decision, to reflect on the nature of their initial rejection. They might begin to wonder if they acted prematurely, if they misunderstood the significance of the relationship, or if they overlooked the depth of the emotional bond they once shared. These questions often remain unspoken, lingering in the background of their thoughts. The deeper the emotional connection, the harder it is to simply forget or dismiss. And so when the person who rejected you returns, it is often because they can no longer ignore the emotional ties that bind them to you. They are pulled back by the remnants of the connection they have yet to fully process, and the realization that walking away did not, in fact, sever the bond. The unresolved emotional ties that linger after rejection are not just a reflection of the past, they also influence the future. Even if the person returns with the intention of rekindling the relationship, the emotional residue of the past can shape their behavior and their perception of you. They may return with a sense of guilt or regret, acknowledging the emotional weight of their previous actions. The unresolved emotions they carry with them may cause them to be hesitant or guarded in their approach, unsure of how to navigate the emotional landscape that was left behind. They may feel the need to apologize, to make amends for the pain they caused, or to seek reassurance that they can once again be part of your life without repeating their past mistakes. For the person who was rejected, the return of the individual who once walked away can trigger a mixture of emotions. On the one hand, there may be relief, as if a long-held wound is finally being acknowledged. But there can also be hesitation and uncertainty. The emotional ties that were once severed may have left scars, and even though the person returns, the past rejection may not easily be forgotten. You might wonder whether their return is genuine or merely a result of their own emotional struggle. The uncertainty surrounding their motivations adds complexity to the situation, making it difficult to navigate the potential for reconciliation. They are active forces pulling on both individuals, guiding them toward introspection, reflection, and ultimately the possibility of resolution. Whether or not the emotional connection is fully healed or severed depends on how both parties choose to engage with it. The key is in the recognition and acknowledgement of those ties, the acceptance that the emotional bond does not simply vanish but requires processing. Until that happens, the emotional imprint of the past continues to shape the present and in many cases draws people back together. The fear of missing out, commonly referred to as FOMO, is an emotional and psychological phenomenon that has become deeply ingrained in human behavior. It is the fear that we are missing out on something important, whether it's an experience, a relationship, or an opportunity that others are taking part in. This fear in many ways is tied to the perception that someone else is experiencing something better, something more meaningful, and that by comparison we are left behind. While FOMO is often associated with social media and the digital age, where constant comparisons to others can amplify feelings of inadequacy or longing, it is by no means a modern invention. The roots of FOMO lie in the primal instincts of human nature, specifically in the desire to avoid social exclusion and the urge to ensure that we are not missing out on valuable experiences or connections. FOMO stems from a fear of loss, whether it's the fear of losing an opportunity or the fear of losing someone important. This fear is particularly pronounced when someone has experienced rejection or distance from a relationship. In the case of romantic rejection, for instance, a person may walk away from a relationship or choose not to pursue it further, only to later realize that the connection they once had was more valuable than they initially perceived. In this moment of realization, they may begin to experience the unsettling sensation of missing out. What seemed like a simple decision at the time, one based on convenience, fear, or confusion, now feels like an irretrievable loss. The fear of missing out in this sense becomes a catalyst for their return. This fear is not just about the potential loss of an experience, but the loss of status or relevance. In social and romantic contexts, people often derive a sense of self-worth from their ability to be desired, to be needed, to be part of something significant. When someone walks away from a connection, they may feel as though they are no longer seen as important or worthy of attention. The fear of missing out can arise when they begin to realize that their absence has created a void, one that others may now be filling. The person who was rejected or distanced may start to feel as though they are being left behind, as though their place in someone's life has been replaced by someone else. This fear can be deeply unsettling, triggering feelings of insecurity and a longing to reclaim the position they once held. In this way, FOMO is not merely a reflection of what someone has lost, but also of what they have yet to experience. When someone rejects you, they may initially believe they are making the right choice, opting for something else, something they think will bring them greater happiness, fulfillment, or excitement. But as time passes, they may begin to wonder what they've left behind. They might question their decision, asking themselves if they made the right choice, or if there was something more meaningful in the relationship they walked away from. The fear of missing out arises from the recognition that perhaps the grass wasn't greener on the other side, and that they may have overlooked something special, something worth holding on to. The fear of missing out is also often tied to a sense of time. When people reject or distance themselves from relationships, they are making a judgment about what they believe will benefit them most in the moment. However, as time passes, they may begin to see things differently. The future becomes more uncertain, and the things they once took for granted begin to feel more valuable. This sense of time, of what is finite and irreplaceable, can amplify feelings of loss. The fear of missing out becomes particularly potent when someone realizes that the opportunity they once had is slipping away, and that no amount of time can bring it back. This realization is often accompanied by a sense of regret for the decision to walk away, regret for not fully appreciating what was available in the moment, and a desire to make up for lost time. For the person who has distanced themselves from you, the fear of missing out may also stem from a deeper sense of uncertainty about their own life or identity. They may have initially rejected you because they were unsure of what they wanted, or because they felt they weren't ready for a relationship. In the time that follows, they may experience personal growth, reflection, or even loneliness. During this period of introspection, they may come to realize that they were not as certain as they thought they were, and that the relationship they walked away from was a source of stability, connection, and meaning in their life. The fear of missing out in this case is a realization that their life is not as complete without you as they once imagined. The absence of your presence, once taken for granted, now feels like a void that needs to be filled. FOMO can also manifest in the way we view others in our social or romantic circles. In today's world, where social media allows us to view the curated highlights of other people's lives, it becomes increasingly difficult to avoid the comparison trap. When someone has rejected you and moved on, they may see others moving forward with their lives, and this can trigger feelings of inadequacy or fear of being left behind. In a romantic context, seeing someone else receive the attention or affection they once sought from you can intensify this fear. The fear of missing out is amplified when someone is faced with the reality that others are now filling the emotional role they once had in their life, making them feel as though they have been replaced or forgotten. This fear is not always conscious or immediately apparent. Often it lurks beneath the surface, influencing behavior and decisions in subtle ways. A person may not fully understand why they feel compelled to return after rejecting you, but at its core, it is a reaction to the fear of losing something valuable. It is the recognition that what they had with you was not something to be taken lightly, and that the connections they are now seeking elsewhere may not measure up. The return, in this sense, is driven by a realization that they have missed out on something meaningful, and that no matter how much time has passed, they can still try to recapture it. The fear of missing out is a powerful psychological force, one that often drives people back into relationships they once abandoned, fueled by the desire to reclaim something they did not fully appreciate in the moment. Life is defined by constant change. Circumstances shift, priorities evolve, and what once seemed stable or secure can suddenly feel uncertain or irrelevant. These changes are not always predictable, and they often catch us off guard, disrupting the course of our lives in unexpected ways. When it comes to relationships, personal decisions, and emotional bonds, a shift in circumstances can play a significant role in altering how we perceive ourselves, others, and our connections. One of the most powerful manifestations of this change is seen when someone who once rejected or distanced themselves from you comes back into your life. Their return is often driven by a shift in their own circumstances, a realization that what they once thought was true no longer fits their current reality. The human experience is filled with periods of growth, uncertainty, and reevaluation. People change over time, and so do their circumstances. A person may reject you or decide to move away from a relationship due to factors that have little to do with you personally, but instead are linked to their own internal struggles or external pressures. These shifts might include changes in career, personal goals, mental health, or even life stages. For instance, someone may walk away from a relationship because they feel they need to focus on their career, or they might decide they aren't ready for the commitment that comes with a serious romantic involvement. At the time, these reasons might seem like rational and well thought out decisions. However, over time, circumstances evolve, and the reasons that once felt so urgent or all-consuming may begin to lose their relevance. As the person moves forward, the very things that led them to reject you in the first place can start to lose their significance. For example, someone who initially distanced themselves because of a busy career might eventually reach a point where their career no longer defines them, or where they have achieved a certain level of success that brings them satisfaction. Their focus might shift from external achievements to internal desires such as connection, love, or companionship. When the person's circumstances change in this way, they may begin to look back and realize that the relationship they walked away from had elements of value that they now wish to reclaim. Likewise, changes in a person's emotional state can lead to a reevaluation of previous decisions. A person who was once emotionally unavailable or closed off may undergo a period of self-reflection or personal growth. This change could come about through therapy, the passage of time, or a life-altering experience that shifts their perspective on relationships and the importance of emotional connection. As they grow and heal, they might come to recognize that their previous rejection was more about their own inability to process emotions or their fear of intimacy than it was about you or the relationship itself. This realization often leads to a change in how they view you and your relationship, and they may feel compelled to return, seeking what they once turned away from. External factors also play a significant role in the way a person's circumstances change. Life events such as the loss of a loved one, a major health scare, or a period of personal hardship can prompt a person to reconsider what truly matters in life. The weight of such experiences can cause someone to reprioritize relationships, realizing that the emotional connection they had with you is something they no longer want to lose. They might also begin to see the importance of having meaningful, stable relationships in their lives, especially in times of personal turmoil. The absence of your presence, which once felt manageable, can suddenly feel like a void that they are now eager to fill. The realization that their own internal struggles are easier to face with someone by their side can lead them to seek you out again, even if it means confronting past mistakes or misunderstandings. This change in circumstances is not always about the person's internal growth or self-discovery, however. It can also arise from external factors that cause a shift in their view of the relationship. For example, the person who once rejected you might have been influenced by the opinions of others, friends, family, or even societal expectations at the time of their decision. They may have chosen to distance themselves from you because of pressure from these external sources, only to later realize that the choices of others do not necessarily align with their own desires. Over time, they may begin to see that the relationship they walked away from was more authentic, more fulfilling, and more aligned with their true values than the path they initially chose. The change in their external environment, whether it's a change in social circles, a shift in societal norms, or a more profound understanding of their personal needs, can prompt them to reconsider their previous decision. In romantic relationships, this shift in circumstances can also be tied to the timing of the relationship. Perhaps when you first met, the person wasn't in a place where they were ready for the commitment or responsibility that comes with a relationship. They might have been dealing with unresolved emotional baggage or past trauma, making them incapable of fully investing in the relationship. However, as time passes and they heal or evolve, they might reach a point where they are finally able to offer the kind of commitment and emotional availability that they couldn't before. This change in their readiness for a relationship can inspire them to return, hoping that they can now experience what they previously pushed away. The return of someone after a change in circumstances is often an emotional process that involves both recognition and regret. As the person reevaluates their life and their decisions, they may come to realize that the rejection they once offered was not a reflection of you, but of their own inability to handle the situation at the time. They might feel regret for having turned away from something valuable and wish to rectify their past mistake. In such cases, the desire to return is not simply about nostalgia or longing, it is about a recognition that the circumstances that led to their previous decision are no longer relevant, and that the connection they once dismissed is now seen through a different lens. The shift in circumstances does not necessarily mean that the relationship will be able to pick up where it left off. Both parties have changed in the time that has passed, and those changes can either facilitate a deeper connection or create new challenges. The person who returns may find that they have grown in ways that the other person has not, or that the dynamics of the relationship no longer fit as seamlessly as they once did. It is important to understand that a change in circumstances is not always a guarantee of a smooth reunion, but it is often a catalyst for reopening the door to what was once rejected. The return, then, is a reflection of the fluidity of life. It speaks to the ever-changing nature of human experiences and how our perspectives shift in response to both internal and external changes. A change in circumstances can make the past look different, prompting both reflection and a desire to reclaim what was once lost. Self-reflection is a fundamental aspect of human development. It is the process by which individuals take the time to look inward, to examine their actions, thoughts, and emotions, and to assess how they have shaped their lives. It is a powerful tool for personal growth because it allows us to gain a deeper understanding of who we are, why we make certain choices, and how our past experiences influence our present behavior. This introspection often leads to growth as we learn from our mistakes, confront our weaknesses, and strive to improve ourselves. In relationships, self-reflection can be particularly transformative. It allows individuals to reassess their decisions, recognize patterns in their behavior, and identify areas where they have room for growth. This is especially true in the context of rejection and emotional distancing. When someone rejects you or chooses to walk away, it can be painful, and initially it may seem like a straightforward decision, either due to personal reasons, incompatibility, or timing. However, over time, that rejection can provoke self-reflection in both parties, causing them to look back on the relationship and examine what went wrong or why things didn't work out. The person who once rejected you may begin a journey of self-reflection that allows them to better understand the reasons behind their decision. Sometimes people reject others because they are not in the right place emotionally, psychologically, or even socially to engage in a meaningful relationship. They may be unaware of their own emotional blockages or unaddressed issues, which prevent them from fully investing in someone else. As they reflect on their past actions, they may begin to realize that their rejection was not necessarily a reflection of your worth, but rather a manifestation of their own personal limitations or fears. It is during these moments of introspection that they can grow and evolve. They may recognize that their inability to commit or to nurture the relationship was tied to unresolved issues within themselves, fear of vulnerability, a need for control, or an inability to trust. This self-reflection can lead to significant personal growth. The person who once walked away may come to understand that they were not ready for the kind of relationship you offered, or that their emotional state at the time wasn't conducive to building something meaningful. With time and introspection, they may work on overcoming their own insecurities, fears, or emotional baggage. As they grow, they become better equipped to handle relationships in the future and may realize that their initial rejection was a result of their own self-limiting beliefs or lack of emotional readiness. This growth does not happen in isolation. Often it is influenced by life experiences that force individuals to confront their inner struggles. For instance, someone who has been through a difficult breakup, a personal loss, or a period of self-doubt may undergo a transformation that helps them understand their own emotions and how they affect the relationships they form. These experiences act as catalysts for growth, providing opportunities to reflect on past behaviors and to make more conscious, thoughtful decisions moving forward. Through this process, individuals gain a clearer understanding of themselves, their needs, and what they truly desire in relationships. On the other hand, the person who was rejected may also go through a process of self-reflection. Rejection, while painful, can be a powerful motivator for growth. When we experience rejection, it often forces us to examine ourselves, our behavior, our choices, and our role in the relationship. While it may be easy to blame the other person for walking away, self-reflection invites us to ask ourselves hard questions. Did I contribute to the breakdown of the relationship? Did I overlook red flags? Was I emotionally available or distant? How did I communicate my needs and desires? By answering these questions, we can gain insights into how we relate to others and what we need to work on to improve ourselves. Self-reflection after rejection offers an opportunity for growth. It is a chance to understand where we might have gone wrong, where we might have been too demanding or not demanding enough, where we might have failed to communicate effectively, or where we might have been too emotionally closed off. This introspection is critical because it allows us to break free from patterns that no longer serve us. By taking responsibility for our own actions and behaviors, we can grow into more self-aware, emotionally intelligent individuals. This growth doesn't happen overnight. It requires time, patience, and the willingness to confront uncomfortable truths about ourselves. Through self-reflection, both the person who rejected and the person who was rejected have the opportunity to grow. Sometimes it is only through the lens of reflection that the true value of a relationship becomes apparent. A person may walk away from something that seemed difficult or uncertain at the time, only to realize later that the bond they shared was deeper than they initially recognized. Self-reflection enables them to understand what was lost, and in some cases it inspires them to return and attempt to rebuild the connection. The person who was rejected, in turn, may realize that they were not as invested in the relationship as they could have been, or they may uncover emotional wounds or unresolved issues that contributed to the distance. Through this process, both individuals have the chance to learn more about themselves, about the other person, and about the nature of relationships in general. Growth through self-reflection also involves learning how to deal with the complexities of emotions. When someone walks away, it can stir up feelings of anger, sadness, and confusion. But self-reflection allows us to move beyond these initial emotional responses and to look at the situation with clarity. It helps us process these emotions in a healthy way so that we don't carry them into future relationships. It also teaches us how to set boundaries, communicate our needs effectively, and navigate the challenges that arise in relationships. Self-reflection is not just about identifying past mistakes, it is also about recognizing our strengths. It is an opportunity to acknowledge the positive aspects of our behavior, the ways in which we have grown, and the ways in which we have learned to love and care for others. This recognition is important because it builds self-confidence and self-compassion, which are essential for continued growth. Self-reflection and growth are intertwined. Reflection provides the space for growth to occur, and growth in turn deepens our capacity for reflection. Through this ongoing process, individuals become more emotionally mature, better equipped to handle the challenges of life, and more capable of forming meaningful and lasting relationships. Self-reflection is not a one-time event, but a continuous practice that shapes who we are and how we move through the world. It is through this process that we become better versions of ourselves, able to face the future with greater understanding, resilience, and wisdom. In conclusion, the real reason a man comes back after rejecting you is often rooted in a complex mix of emotional realization, personal growth, and shifting circumstances. His return is driven by a newfound understanding of what he values, the recognition of past mistakes, and the fear of missing out on something meaningful. Whether it's self-reflection, the recognition of unresolved emotional ties, or the realization that the timing was wrong, his return signifies a change within himself. Ultimately, it reflects his recognition that the connection you shared holds more value than he initially realized, prompting him to seek it once again.